Hey friends, today we're just making a regular sourdough boule. So I'm just making sure that my starter is nice and active and bubbly, and then I'm adding water with a scale to measure. And then I'm going to grab my starter and measure that out. I like to go ahead and mix my starter and water together so that it's incorporated well, and then I add the flour and salt. Alright, so we are just weighing our flour, and I just use regular Great Value all-purpose flour, nothing fancy. That's what I feed my starter with every time, and that's what I make all of my loaves with, so I've never had a problem doing that. We do have well water, so I don't know if that's makes a difference since it is bleached flour, but anyway, never had a problem. This is just the salt that I'm adding, and we'll get everything incorporated really good. Sometimes I use a spatula, sometimes I use a wooden spoon, sometimes I use a Danish dough whisk, sometimes I use my hand. Just kind of depends on what's close by. These regular loaves are a pretty tight dough, so I usually like to get them incorporated as good as I can, and then let it sit for 20 or 30 minutes and let that flour absorb all of the water, and then it's a lot easier to handle. Okay, so once that's set on the counter for, like I said, 20 or 30 minutes, we'll start our stretch and folds. You'll notice the dough is not very strong yet, so you see it tore there the first time. So I just pull up an edge of the dough and stretch it, and then fold it over itself, turning the bowl a quarter of a turn each time. And I try to make a couple of rounds each time that I'm doing a stretch and fold. And typically I space these out about 30 minutes or so. Sometimes I get sidetracked and it's more like an hour or two, but it's fine. The purpose is just to strengthen your dough to make sure that you've got some good gluten development. Must be a clump of flour I was trying to work in. But you'll want to do this 2 or 3 times for sure to make sure you've got a good strong dough. As time goes on, after more stretch and folds, the dough gets a little less sticky each time. And then I don't typically put flour on my hands or wet my hands or anything to do the stretch and folds. So this is the third set of stretching folds. Sometimes it's an hour or two between stretch and folds. If I get sidetracked, life happens, so that's looking pretty good. Getting close to a positive window pane test, so looking good. Alright, this is the next morning after it's set on the counter overnight. I don't use a Banneton basket, I just use a little small bowl and my tea towel. Put a little flour in it to help it prevent it from sticking to the tea towel there. So we'll get our dough that is bulk fermented out of the bowl and put a little flour down on the counter. This is a personal preference. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. So I'm just stretching out that dough, laminating it would be the technical term, getting it nice and thin so that I can then shape it. Once I shape it, I turn it upside down into my bowl and cover it and leave it on the counter for 2 or 3 hours. This is a positive poke test, meaning that whenever I poke my floured finger in, it does not bounce back quickly. Get it onto the parchment paper, score it, and then bake it and enjoy.